Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you're joining us from. We are going simultaneously live to 8 different places this evening. So we're spreading ourselves thinly, which is wonderful. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dan Richardson. I'm an actor, a filmmaker, above all, an advocate for animal welfare and conservation. And it's always my pleasure to support the likes of Compassion in World Farming and other animal charities. And this evening, I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing two heroes, basically, heroes in many ways and in very different ways from each other, both fundamentally involved in animal welfare. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I can see the numbers flying up already. So thank you for joining us, wherever you're joining us from. Just before I introduce our esteemed guests this evening, I want to just invite you guys to ask questions, any questions you have. I'm not 100% sure you can do that from all the platforms we're streaming to, but I know you can do it in Facebook, and I believe you can do it in YouTube as well. So wherever you're joining us from, do please ask any questions. I can see comments coming in already. Hello, guys. Hello, Debbie, Alison, Natasha, Angela, all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, I want to introduce, as I say, two heroes of mine, and I'm sure of many of you as well. And that is Philip Lymbery, CEO of Compassion in World Farming, and the wonderful Joanna Lumley. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How lovely to see you. Thank you so much for giving me the honor of hosting this evening and for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
The pleasure is all mine to be with you both. Thank you both so much for the honor.
Well, it's shared. It's split down the middle, Philip, because I'm just equally as thrilled. It's split 3 ways.
Bless
It is
you. Thank
indeed.
you.
And you know, guys, I always have the great pleasure of being able to chat with these folks before we go live. And I've just had the wonderful pleasure of listening to a little bit of an insight into how you guys met, because it's not last week or last year. This is quite a long running friendship, you guys, a partnership that you guys have. And I wondered if you could share with us how you know each other.
Well, I think that we've known each other, dear Joanna, for 34 years.
Yeah.
You've been a wonderful patron for Compassion in World Farming longer than that. But 34 years ago, I joined as a young lad from Bedfordshire. And I just remember one of the early things that we did was put you in a battery cage, a human-sized battery cage with 4 other people in London. And I think it's always to my great surprise that you're still talking to me and to us all these years on. And we've done so many things to raise the profile of animal welfare and being kind to animals.
But Philip, that was a particularly good example because it had a cage and it showed what 5 creatures crammed into that cage. Now, in fact, we were representing chickens and how much room there is for battery hens inside these cages. And we were literally jammed together. It was me, the actor Chris Timothy, the gorgeous singer Lindsay DePaul, a nun called Sister Pam, and the great writer and animal supporter at every stage, Audrey Eighton, who wrote the F-Plan diet and was a really great advocate for animals everywhere. And we were jammed in there and we felt nothing but affection for you as you locked us in. It was in Trafalgar Square and a great crowd gathered around because it was quite an odd thing to see. We were really pressed, squashed in there, and it gave people a sudden real inkling, because sometimes we say a battery hen only has the space of a piece of A4 paper, which is kind of that. But it's quite hard to imagine that when you put an actual bird on it. So it was so interesting. And so what I've loved about Compassion in World Farming is the way that it's demonstrated, it's shown actually what it's like. And I think that's the sort of thing that catches the press and catches people's attention and makes them think so hard about it.
Well, thank you for being part of that sharing. And that was just one example. That was an early example. Others, you've taken a piglet, Babe, to Parliament. You've been down at Dover, locked in a veal crate against live exports, all sorts of things, all manner of things to really get that message home of what we're doing to animals and what we need to stop doing.
Well, I remember so well the Babe incident. So the film Babe had come out, which is why we called this little piglet Babe. Piglets are such intelligent creatures, all pigs. They're very, very clever. And little tiny Babe was brought to my house here in London, where we are now, with her mother, who is actually a sheepdog, and the sheepdog's owner. And little Babe settled down here, and she learned how to use a dirt tray within 60 seconds. She never went wrong. She settled down in front of the fire. I was writing at the time a book, and she settled down and slept beside the fire. She stayed overnight with her keeper and her dog mother. And the next morning we got into a taxi. We'd got a special taxi, which was pig friendly, quite hard to find. And off we went to Parliament. And the press were waiting as if Audrey Hepburn herself was going to get out. And out came little Babe on a lead, being enchanting and immediately thrilled to see some earth she could dig up. It was on that green just outside Parliament, where a lot of the reporters give their reports from Parliament. And she was enchanting. But again, it showed people, A, what a clever and enchanting little creature this piglet was, and B, we were emphasizing, I think it was either farrowing crates actually, or it was live export to show that pigs are live and sentient creatures and not the same as a sack of apples or a sack of potatoes. And they can't be treated as if they don't have feelings. So it was, again, terribly important. And of course, eye-catching, and therefore photographers love it. And therefore a picture is worth 1,000 words. And off it went into the press and told our story, Philip. But all these things are thought up at Compassion in World Farming. And I'm just thrilled to be part of any of them.
Well, that's extremely sweet of you. And I know there was one particular event that we put a lot of thought at Compassion in World Farming into how we could make the picture and get the picture into the papers, and all the things, a veal calf, a model veal calf, and all of these things, they all fell by the wayside because during that press conference, we showed you the latest investigative footage from the live export trade, and it brought you and all of us to tears. And that picture of your human reaction to the tragedy of live exports was the thing which went in all of the papers. Extraordinary.
It was so hard not to weep, actually. I think all of us had tears streaming down our faces, including the hardened members of the press, because it is so shocking. And we can't show these things on television because they're too shocking to show, which is odd in this liberal world where it seems that even quite young children can access the most fearful and horrific events. But we can't show this on television. But it hit home. I usually don't watch these things because you can't take it out of your mind. But it is important that once you do know something, you can't unknow it. And as I know about the cruelty to farm animals and the mismanagement of them by so many people, not by all farmers, and I think Philip is the first to say, absolutely not by all farmers. We're on the side of good farmers, but we're anti-factory farming. And I think that's always the first thing about it. Anti-factory farming, anti-sending creatures abroad to be fattened and slaughtered overseas in much less gentle conditions even than in this country.
Exactly. And I've always said that it takes 30 years to get big change, and I think that the live export trade is a case in point, because we are hopefully just weeks away from a government bill to ban live exports getting onto the statute books. Now, anything could happen in that time, but what we know is that the bill has been introduced by the government. It has all party support. It's now in the House of Lords, having completed its parliamentary session. So so far so good that we could be celebrating this year finally an end to live animal exports for slaughter and fattening from Britain. Won't that be an extraordinary thing?
Well, Philip, it's extraordinary, but will you just detail a bit what live export means and what creatures are exported live and why they don't go as chilled meat carcasses? I mean, why is that? Why do they have to be fattened abroad?
Totally a brilliant question. What's been happening, dear Joanna, right back from those early days when we were working together, is that in the 1990s, 2.5 million sheep, lambs and calves were being exported from Britain to the continent, going on horrendously long journeys, some that can last up to 60 hours. To end up the calves going into veal crates that are narrow, premature coffins where they couldn't turn around for the entirety of their lives. A system that was so cruel it was banned in Britain, has been banned in Britain for 35 years. The sheep and lambs would go on these long, exhausting, frightening journeys simply to be slaughtered at the journey's end. And this in an age where we've got refrigerated lorries where you can transport meat, export it to anywhere in the world. And we've had that technology for 100 years. 100 years. Yet here we are in the dark ages, still exporting animals' lives. So thankfully, we can herald the day when, from Britain at least, that trade stops.
What a great day that will be. And it's such a poignant point you made, Joanna, about the horrors that you can't unsee. And live export that you've just been talking about, Philip, is a great example of that. And of course, the reason we've convened this evening is because it's 10 years, I think, almost to the day, since the release of your amazing award-winning book, Farmageddon, which, among other things, essentially exposed a lot of those horrors, specifically related to factory farming. And what we really wanted to get into this evening, as well as the questions we welcome from you guys watching, is what has and hasn't changed in the decades since then. Because, as you said, Joanna, if for anybody who sees that, it's toxic. It's a poison that will never leave your mind. Yeah. You can never unsee that. And yet humans have this incredible capacity for cognitive dissonance. And with that being the case, Philip, I guess to you, how much have you, from the perspective of compassion in world farming, how much have you seen happen? And to some extent, I hate to say it, but I dare say hasn't happened. What hasn't happened in that decade? What are the key milestones or the key issues that we still face?
Well, I think the first thing is that what we wanted to do with the book, it was the first time that a book, certainly in the European sphere, was setting out the reasons why factory farming needs to end for all our sakes. It's no longer about giving animals bigger cages. The fact that cheap meat and eggs and dairy from animals confined in cages or crowded sheds is the downfall for all of us. It's the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet. It is a major cause of climate change. It is the biggest driver of ecological damage, of wildlife declines, and it is a major pandemic risk. Apart from that, it gives us bad food, high in saturated fats and lower in protein. So really what we wanted to do was to have a book which set out for the everyday reader what I call it a Waterstones book, the book you could pick up in Waterstones, that sets out the need to go beyond cages. Because if I can, 50 years ago we started the campaign against battery cages that we've just talked about, and this was how much space a hen had, pretty much. Now they get that much. What we set out in Farmageddon was that we now need to go to the next stage and get rid of it altogether, get animals out of factory farms. So what has happened in that decade? Look, this is a massive oil tanker that we're turning around here. So it was never going to change overnight. But we've we've brought it much more into the public domain. Some wonderful things that have happened just recently. Food and the way that we produce food is now seen as a big part of the climate discussions by the United Nations. We've seen, as we've already discussed, live exports having all party support in Parliament to ban it. We've also seen that there's been a rise in a mainstreaming of people going flexitarian, of going vegetarian, vegan even. We're seeing veganuary is everywhere. The government have been told by their own food advisor, Henry Dimbleby, that there needs to be a 30% reduction in the meat that we're all consuming as a British nation. So a lot of things are starting to happen, Dan. And Joanna, I don't know if you feel it too, but there does seem to be that strength of conversation, that this is about being kind to animals, but also being kind to ourselves, that we're all in this together. So putting kindness at the very heart of our society is the way.
What I noticed most of all, Philip, is that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if ever you said in a restaurant, I'm a vegetarian, oh, the palaver and the what can we get you, and yet again, lasagna just with nothing in it, or would you like an egg or something like this? I mean, it was completely unheard of. Now, if you look at the colour supplements of the big newspapers over the weekend, for instance, easily half and possibly more of the recipes are vegetarian recipes, which are just offered without any apology at all, but as something delicious to eat. They don't even say, this will be good for you. They just say, this is delicious, incidentally. It's delicious and harms nobody and nothing. And something else, Philip, which I want to ask you, because you'll know the answer to this. We know that if plastic gets into the sea and even goes down into the tiniest bits, it gets into the food chain and the food chain comes back. Think of all those drugs that they put into animals, the hormonal drugs and all kinds of things that they put into animals to keep them. They have to put in antibiotics because they're crowded so close together. They're bound to get ill. And preventative inoculations they give them don't disappear from the animals. So presumably they're being fed onto us, because something that puzzles me, how in our first world, we seem to be getting sicker and sicker. All of us seem to be ill and getting things which we never got before. There seems to be such a rise in the levels of cancer. And people say, oh, it wasn't reported before. Well, it was, but it seems to be on the rise. Where is this coming from? We've got to look properly at all this and realize that we are what we eat. Are we not?
Yeah.
We've got to take that into account. The other thing that I want to say is that some people and the purists amongst the vegans, let's say, oh, it seems pretty silly to try to make things like sausage, try to make pretend sausages. But a lot of people who are thinking of becoming vegetarian will miss the sense of eating spaghetti bolognese, i.e. with mince, but instead of mince, it'd be corn mince or whatever. I don't mean to advertise, but it's one of those minces. Or they would have sausages, or they would have pretend sausages, which are absolutely delicious. I think it's very good to be allowed to do these things and to beckon people in, sort of escallops, which look as though they're chicken, but they're not chicken. They're completely harmless. They've harmed nothing and nobody. And they're usually made from, I think, mushrooms, which are excellent for us anyway. So I've seen a huge change over the past 10 years, including the amount of people who don't want to drink, the young, a lot of young, and all these non-alcohol drinks which are coming. Even Guinness has made a zero alcohol drink. And these things were unthought of 10 years ago, literally unthought of. And it's becoming mainstream now. So this is something to celebrate. And we must build on it and not let it get swept away. Because here's the other thing I want to ask you, Philip. Talk. I talk too much. Which is that a lot of people will say, what about the farmers who do have these farms? What are they supposed to do when they don't? What about the loss of jobs and loss of livelihoods? What are farmers supposed to do? So, Philip, what are farmers supposed to do?
Well, so a number of questions there. What I would say is that what we want with farmers is to move away from factory farming and instead embrace regenerative practices, nature-friendly farming, where the animals are kept in a natural environment, roaming the farm, interspersed with crops that not only helps to bring back wildlife, but also restores the soil. And soil is disappearing at a rate of knots. In 60 years, we will have no soil. And at the same time, what we want is for farming to reduce the number of animals across the board, to have at least half the animals produced as we have today. And just bridging back to your other question about what goes in, doesn't what go in to the production of meat come back out to us as consumers? And you're absolutely right. There's a reason why the book has a subtitle, The True Cost of Cheap Meat. A true cost of cheap meat is that it's unhealthy. Those animals, as you rightly said, being caged, crammed and confined on factory farms, something has to be done to keep them alive and to stave off disease. That is why 2/3 of our antibiotics worldwide are fed to factory farmed animals. 2/3. And that's a major reason why the World Health Organization warns that if we don't do something, then in a short time, we will move to a post-antibiotic era where currently treatable diseases will once again kill. How big could this be? Well, much bigger than the COVID pandemic. It could be killing 10 million people worldwide a year because we've squandered antibiotics by feeding them to factory farmed animals.
And Philip, tell me about the other thing which makes my blood boil is how we feed creatures, where the crops that feed them, this is the grain or whatever it is, where it's grown, then it's got to be transported, and it's used up good land, where that same crop could be feeding the people of that land, is being taken away and brought over here and fed into protein making machines, which are these wretched animals filled with antibiotics, so that we can call it meat and package it up and sell it as cheaply as possible to people. There's something dreadfully Machiavellian about this.
Exactly. Look, we've got nearly a billion people on the planet that don't have enough to eat, that are starving. Yet 4 billion people's worth of food is fed to factory farmed animals in terms of grain, so wheat and corn and soya, and these crops, as you rightly say, are then essentially squandered by those factory farmed animals who waste most of the food value in terms of calories and protein in conversion to factory farmed meat, milk and eggs. If you go to a regenerative farm, a pasture fed situation where the animals are living better lives, then they're eating grass, they're eating something which we couldn't eat, so they're converting something into a net gain. With factory farmed animals, it's not producing food, it's wasting food. And to give you that figure again, 4 billion people's worth of food is wasted every year by feeding it to factory farmed animals. That's enough to feed half of humanity alive today.
It's just extraordinary, isn't it?
Terrifying. And I just wanted to share this photo again. I know I've already shared it, but notice the complete absence of grass.
Yeah.
Complete absence of grass. And this is a super farm, and there's many of them, literally billions of animals with no access to natural resources such as grass, therefore have to be fed. And as you said, Joanna, not just the growing of the crops that are fed to animals rather than to people who are starving, but also transported to this super farm, and many like it, and fed to the animals that are then fed to humans. It's extraordinary waste and carelessness.
And of course, the slurry and stuff that comes off from pig farms and these intensive farms, which automatically goes into the local rivers and streams. I mean, everything is wrong about it. Philip, everything is wrong about this. And I know that a lot of people say to me, but what about people who haven't got much money? They must be able to get cheap food. And you go, I quite agree. We ought to be able to get cheap food. And I think in France, they never allow the price of bread to rise above somebody at least being able to get a baton to go out and get some bread and at least have some bread and some coffee or some water or something to at least survive. But people say we've got so used to chicken McNuggets or whatever it might be that we want them dirt cheap. If we don't even want to finish them, we can chuck them in a bin. I mean, the waste of life hurts me so much. But what do we say to people who say you're discriminating against poor people?
Well, I think that we need to take a long, hard look at society and change it. What kind of society are we when we say that people on low incomes have to feed their children on poor quality, unhealthy, factory farmed meat? What kind of statement is that? What I believe is that decent food, ethically produced food, should be a basic human right. That's where we need to be.
Yeah. Do you think there should be subsidies from the government, our government in particular, as there used to be farm subsidies when we were in the European Union? I think there should be subsidies for good farming. I think that, creatures which are brought up outside in the fresh air with grass and hens to cluck and scratch and perch and so on, I think those farms should be subsidized. And then maybe that, what would be quite expensive meat, should be eaten less often, and all dietitians tell you that. We all eat far too much meat. And if we go back to the earliest, even back to Bible days, when they'd say, to kill the fatted calf, it meant that it was a special occasion. You'd have a piece of meat because it was a special occasion. And the basic food of all our countries is good. And it might be pasta, it might be rice, it might be bread, it might be tortillas or grain or whatever it is. That's the basic food. And we spice it up with spices and herbs and vegetables. And this is a good diet with fruit and things like this in season. And then very occasionally, something which is expensive and rare and special and to be celebrated and to be given thanks for, a beautiful piece of fish, one lovely roast chicken or something. But that creature has had a wonderful life, not in a fish farm covered with lice and being driven around so we can sell salmon, which used to be the king of fish, dirt cheap, where we practically feed it to cats, do you know?
Exactly. No, you're entirely right. And let's be really clear that we as taxpayers are paying a huge amount to subsidize agriculture already. We're subsidizing it going down the wrong direction. So here in Britain, about £3 billion worth of taxpayers' money every year has been going into agriculture, and 40% of the entire EU budget goes into agriculture. Essentially helping it go into this damaging factory farming way. So why not use that money, exactly as you suggested, Joanna, in a positive way to recalibrate the food system, to set it going in a regenerative way? This is starting to happen here in the UK. We have the Environmental Land Management Scheme, but it's not enough. There's not enough money going behind it or enough impetus. What we really need is governments setting clear targets that they're going to move away from factory farming and are going to put in place policies that enable everyone to eat less and better meat and dairy.
What do you think about, I loved Paul McCartney for introducing No Meat Monday or whatever it was called, Meat Free Monday.
That's it.
And I can remember long ago, even before we met, Philip, being on a trek in Pakistan, and we'd all run out of money and we were fairly sort of sparse, and I was with a group of youngish men, and it was an expedition that had run out of money. And I was feeding, there were about 10 or 9 of us there. And sometimes we would only have 2 eggs to make supper for the all of these hungry young chaps. And they were yearning to get back to Rawalpindi on the bus, where they began to dream about the things that they would eat. Of course, they had been without meat for so long. They were all going, oh, I'm going to have this. I'm going to have a steak. I'm going to have this. I shall have roast chicken. And when we got there, it was a Thursday, and it was a meat-free day. And that was it. You could not get meat anywhere. It was just not on. It was not available throughout the country. And I think that's something, and it sounds draconian, but I think it's rather exciting. Just occasionally, we used to have Sunday, which had no shopping, that's gone. We could have a day when you don't eat meat. Restaurants don't serve it. It won't be for sale in the shops. What do you think? I know it's mad. People say I'm mad, so I'm going to stop.
I think it's a brilliant idea. And I'll tell you, I can put a number on why I think it's a brilliant idea. Because, and Meat Free Monday is a great example. And I think it's a lot like you mentioned meat substitutes, where there's some pretty sort of purist vegans who will say, why would you ever want to eat something that tastes like meat? But as you mentioned, it's for the people converting from meat eating to vegetarian or vegan. Well, I think the same is true of, it's the same concept. If you think about Meat Free Monday, if everyone did it, is exactly the same as over 1 billion people going vegan. Because it's one day of the week. There's 7 days of the week. There's 8 billion human beings. It would literally be like 1 billion or more people going vegan if they just didn't eat meat on Monday, which is incredible. So I think it's a brilliant idea, and and Veganuary is another good example of it, and it's catching on fast.
Exactly. I agree with you both. These are such important measures, and I want to just give a plug to a new book from a friend of mine, Annabelle Randall's, Less Meat, More Plants, which basically is a book for people that want to go on this journey, want to bring plants as more of the food on their plate. It tells you why it's a good thing. It tells you how. Wonderful recipes. So yeah, less meat, more plants. I would recommend it to everyone.
And Philip, talking of more plants, I was with Jamie Oliver about 4 years ago doing some filming, and they had a part of that show which was dedicated to showing that we can grow in this country all kinds of beans, which at the moment we all go, oh, Borlotti beans, they come from Italy, these beans come from so-and-so. You don't have to. We can grow them here. We can grow them here in Norfolk. We don't just have to put fields down to clover. We can grow beans and pulses of all kinds. We could grow them here. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
It would. And let's be clear about this, that if there was no meat and dairy produced, then we would need a quarter of the agricultural land area that we currently use. So that's a big saving right there. That's on a worldwide and a national basis. So moving towards a diet that is more plant rich, much less reliant on meat and dairy, and certainly with no factory farming. That is the way to go. And I saw a question popped up about the waste of meat in supermarkets, and let's be clear there, and we've put a figure on it, and about 15 billion animals are reared, usually factory farmed animals, are reared, slaughtered and binned. That's the number of animals in the equivalent of meat that we waste every year. About 1 in every 6 or 7 animals born and reared on a farm is binned.
And we just had a lovely pop-up. Sorry, Dan, a little pop-up from Anne Griffin, she said there is cheap food. There are beans, lentils, rice. These are cheap foods, and we should all have our store cupboards should be filled with those things.
Absolutely. And to supplement what you said, Philip, about the waste, because a lot of the conversation we've had so far, and indeed the comments that were coming in at that point in the conversation, was related to the waste. And Philip's just put that number on it, which is terrifying. That's just the waste. And this is because we're nearing 100 billion farmed animals globally annually. And to put that into some vague perspective, because the numbers are incomprehensible, that's more than all the human beings that have ever existed in the entirety of the history of mankind. That's the numbers we're talking about, and that's annually, and it's only growing because so is the population. So I think that underlines the importance of these sorts of endeavors that Compassion in World Farming are undertaking, and that you, Joanna, support so wonderfully. I wanted to ask some of the questions that have come in. And guys, just let me say apologies, because there's so many of you and so many comments, and we love that you're being interactive and engaging with this. Forgive me in advance if I don't get to your question. I'm going to tell you right now, I won't get to about 99% of them. But one of the questions that's come in, and forgive me because I can't even find it, I'd love to share it on screen, is what are the 3 things, and I think I'm going to share one of the things, but what are the 3 things we can all be doing to help in this endeavor?
I would say that get involved in the movement. So sign up to an organization like Compassion in World Farming. We'll be sending you ideas on a regular basis, how you can help put pressure on your politicians, your supermarkets, and so on to create better change. I would say spread the word through your social media. Get the word out there. And the third thing is seize the power on your plate. Each of us has the power 3 times a day to make a difference by choosing to eat more plants. And if we eat meat, less and better meat, dairy and eggs, making sure that it comes from regenerative, pasture-fed, free-range or organic sources.
And I would say when people come round to supper here, they will have some sort of shepherd's pie or something like that, but it'll be made with corn mince and nobody even knows the difference, and it's delicious and lovely. Simply do things normally now. It's completely normal to have vegetarian meals. You don't have to apologize or say, I'm afraid there's no meat, or we're doing this. The amount of recipes around to make everything a celebration of all the good things. So try to turn your face away, rather like the Zoroastrians. Look for the good things. Turn your face against the bad things. Do not get caught up in things that involve slaughter. It's ghastly. And it stains you. We're like trees. Everything we do is in a sort of circle. And like trees, as they get older and older, it's all within us. If you are connected with slaughter, with torture, with bullying, with stealing, with lying, it becomes part of you. Don't let these things be part of you. You can get rid of them simply by not doing them. Don't preach to people. People hate being preached at. Simply live by example to yourself. And that means don't waste food. Be like the French, bonne femme, who always keeps things and puts things back into a soup or a stew of some kind. Remember that this planet is finite. We didn't think it was. We thought it would go on forever. We thought the moon would be forever. And look at that. They're getting on there and throwing stuff at it and leaving filth behind. Let's be so careful now, collectively, to take absolute care of ourselves and our surroundings and those we love as well as we can. And don't give up on it. Don't be chased away from it. Don't be extreme either, because people are very frantic. You know, we're all called bunny huggers, as you know. And we're ridiculed for caring about what we've been taught in almost all religions are subservient creatures, things that don't matter as much as we matter. But as that great Roman philosopher said, if horses could draw, they would draw gods as horses. And of course, we've made ourselves in mankind to be the gods of the world. We're not, we're part of it. We've got to be very careful how much we take up. Philip, I believe there's some extraordinary proportion of the world's creatures. I think it's something like 94% are human beings and the animals they plan to kill.
That's
and
it.
Wild animals have shriveled to nil.
Exactly. Yeah. Mammals are in single digits. Wild mammals are in single digits. More than 90% of the mammals now on planet Earth are people and our farmed animals.
It's shattering. It's
incredible
numbers.
So this is the other thing. Just jump out of it. Don't be part of it. Try to get out of that. And also celebrate. Look after things. Use cling film twice, 3 times. Use things. Fold paper carefully and reuse it. Unpick the string and keep it. Don't throw things away. I'm lucky enough to be able to be rich enough to recycle the plastic wrapping that seems cellophane that seems to come on everything. I have a special thing, TerraCycle, which is where I put all the stuff and I eventually have it collected up and taken away, and they dispose of it properly and do things like this. But we've been very slow in starting up. My new passion. Okay, I'm not going to stop. I want to say this one word, and I want you all to take it to your hearts. Pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is the burning of plastic. We can't be without plastic. Plastic is actually a wonderful substance, but we've got to know how to dispose of it. Pyrolysis burns at such a high temperature. It burns the plastic at such a high temperature that it could fire all the steelworks which are now being closed in Wales. But we've got to work out how to deal with the effluent that comes out of the top, the smoke that comes out of the top, which, although in Singapore they say is only like smoking a cigarette, it's not, it's more than that. But let's concentrate on that. We can get men onto the moon and take photographs of Mars. So let's at least concentrate on how we could burn plastic. Imagine that. If we could collect all the plastic that's showered on us every day and know how it could be disposed of, because you go to any of the big recycling dumps and they say, we can do everything with everything except plastic. So plastic is one of the great things. And when your meat comes on a plastic tray wrapped in cellophane, and it's cheap meat, know what I mean?
Very well put. Very well put. One thing to add to those wonderful words from both of you is on the screen you guys will see an unclickable link. Unclickable, I'm going to rectify any moment now. There's a petition. Compassion in World Farming have created a petition to ask for an end to this horror of factory farming that we're discussing this evening. I have posted it as a comment. I'm going to do it again because there's so many of you commenting, which we love, but I'm going to post it again so you see it right there. It's going to come through as posted by Compassion in World Farming and me simultaneously. 4 links all in one. That link is clickable. So in the comments section, you will be able to click that link. Don't leave us now. We'd love for you to stay. But when you do get a chance, click that link and it will take you right to the web page where you can just fill in your details. You know how petitions work. Please sign that petition. It's over 400,000 people already. 400,000 people demanding an end to this factory farming horror show that we're talking about tonight. So you can make a difference with these sorts of things. Hope that answers your question. Forgive me again, I missed who the question was asked by because of the comments rattling through so fast. But thank you for those wonderful questions. And thank you for those wonderful answers, guys, about how people can get involved. I think that's the most important thing about these kinds of conversations, is that we empower people. People know what they can do. And you guys have just articulated that beautifully. So thank you.
Dan, can I jump in before you brilliantly continue and try to wrap us up? Because we can't be shut up now.
I'm not wrapping it up anytime soon. People love this.
Rewilding, which a lot of people, and of course a lot of farmers go, well, that's just tosh. We can't do rewilding. It can't happen. But there's this huge, the Knepp estate, beginning with K-N-E-P-P, the Knepp estate down in Sussex, or sorry, I can't remember, which is completely decided, they've simply decided to let it go, literally just let nature take care of itself. And of course, it's taken a long time. First of all, it was just brambles and nettles, looked like nothing. Then gradually the right things came in. Then the balance came in, the great balance of our greatest tutor of all, our greatest carer and tutor, which is nature, which knows all the answers, comes in, and it's brought back nightingales, it's brought back collar doves, it's got storks, it has wild boar, wild cows, wild. And I said to Isabella Tree, who runs it with her husband Charlie, I said, what do you do? What, you leave the animals out? She said, yes, the animals, they stay out. And I said, you don't bring them in at winter? No, because they're animals, that's where they live. And I said, what happens if they get into trouble birthing a calf or something? She says, well, the foxes will come and the things if that creature dies. And I said, what if the cow dies? Then all the creatures will gradually pick that up. But all the animals live life to the full, exactly as they were supposed to. Now, what they do is, of course, they've got deer, they've got cattle, they've got beautiful pigs, they've got sheep, everything living wild. They go out occasionally and take some of these wild creatures, which are just wild, bang, gone in 1 second, having lived a perfect life, shot, and then they're sold as expensive meat. And that seems to me a way of making this work, which not only brings back all the insects and butterflies and moths and birds and rats and water voles and all these things like this. It's suddenly apologizing to nature and said, we've absolutely wrecked it with our huge prairie farms and our hard way of looking after the creatures of this planet who have just as much right to be here as we have, making them have too many of them, then keeping them on iron slats. This is one way of apologizing, saying, look, we could do a little bit of our farm, could go wild, a little bit more of the ploughed fields, don't plough them anymore, scratch the surface and put the seeds down, but a little bit more could be given to the verges, a little bit more care taken to when you trim your hedges, so you're not taking the berries off or making it difficult for birds to nest. There's a huge tie-in with all this, Philip, isn't it? It's a general open-heartedness of greeting nature, saying first of a huge apology, and we will now make amends for the horrors that we've inflicted on this earth.
Absolutely. Rewilding to me is a fantastic concept. NEP is one of the places that really blew my mind. It blew the sides off of what I thought was possible. And it's been a huge source of inspiration ever since. Rewilders up and down the country, across Europe, across the world. It's a concept whose time has come, and I think it's the perfect bedfellow, if you like, to that regenerative, nature-friendly form of farming, which has a lot of rewilding traits, not least in rewilding the soil that we all need, because as things are going with factory farming of keeping animals in confinement, what's also happening is their feed is being produced using chemical fertilizers and pesticides, destroying the soil life, destroying the soil itself. So that is why the third book in the Farmageddon trilogy, and Joanna, you've been so brilliant to help launch all three of those books. Bless you. Thank you. The third book is 60 harvests left. That's how long we've got to turn this thing around. So we need to get rid of factory farming. We need to bring on that rewilding. We need to end the horror show, as Dan has put it. And that is why I encourage everyone to sign up to the petition, End It, by Compassion in World Farming. End it, share it. Let's get this thing done.
That's a key message. Thank you for that, Philip, because one of the most powerful things you can do, above and beyond what Joanna and Philip have shared, is to share this video, share the link to the petition that I've just put on screen again, and I'm going to put it into the chat again because I know that it disappears pretty rapidly. Copy, paste, boom, done. It's on its way in again. Please click that link, and more importantly, share it with everybody, friends and family. The thing is, you don't have to be vegan like me to want less cruelty. I'm going to share some pictures. Don't worry, guys. You know me. I don't share graphic images or videos. Having said that, it's pretty horrendous. And I'm just showing the cramped conditions. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I'll show you the conditions these factory farmed animals are living in. I say living in the loosest sense of the word. It's horrific. And even those folks who do want to eat meat, even those folks who don't care about health, their own health, even if those folks who aren't actively involved in animal welfare, they don't want this. This is the kind of thing that anyone can get behind, anyone in their right mind. I just saw another comment pop up saying, let's end fox hunting. Great comment. I think it was, there you go, Des. Thank you, Des, who I did a film with years ago. Nice to see you pop up, Des. End fox hunting. It's one of those things that everybody can get behind, everybody can agree with. So share that petition. I'm so happy there's over 400,000 signatures on that petition, but I'm always staggered that it's not millions and millions of people, because who doesn't agree with this kind of thing? Who wants that kind of cruelty? I don't believe anybody. I believe in the inherent good nature of people, with a few exceptions. But for the most part,
give us those exceptions. Come on, Dan, get dangerous. Who are the exceptions?
I know if there's any Trump supporters on, I'm not sorry. I just had a siren. I was like, wow, that was quick. He's the police. He's got me. Okay, so please do share the link. I'm going to share some images with you of why you need to share that link, why we need to end factory farming. And Philip, I wanted to ask you if you can just kind of share with us a little bit about the impact. I think a lot of people understand just how devastating factory farming can be in terms of the land required for it as well, and how much of the earth's natural resources are being plundered to make way for cattle ranching. I'm going to share a photograph of that to begin with. And what kind of numbers are you seeing in relation to that? And again, coming back to that original question about what's changed since the release of Farmageddon 10 years ago and what hasn't changed. Are things slowing down? You hear terrifying numbers, like the size of Surrey being scythed out of the Amazon rainforest every couple of days, or something terrifying. What sort of things are we seeing these days?
Well, the bad news is that factory farming is still the way that cheap meat, that most meat, is produced worldwide. So this is an oil tanker. It is going to take time to turn around. But the great news, because I think we do need to be seizing the positives, the great news is that there is a global conversation at the highest level that we need to a food system transformation. So I've been privileged to be involved as a champion for the UN Food Systems Summit, and governments from across the world have now taken on this language that there needs to be a food system transformation. Governments are increasingly talking about the existential threat to humanity if we continue with the food system that we have. And central, the biggest plank of that food system is the factory farming of animals and the crops that we feed to those animals. So let's get behind that conversation to transform the food system away from factory farming, away to and to a much more nature friendly, animal welfare friendly way of keeping animals. That would be my summary. Dan.
Beautifully put. Thank you. They look happy to me. In fact, I remember when we met, Philip, like a few years ago now, when we interviewed you for my documentary, Food for Thought, which, by the way, explores the driving forces behind the phenomenon that Joanna spoke of. The fact that 10 years ago, these things that were never even thoughts in anybody's mind are now mainstream. Every restaurant has a vegan or vegetarian menu, not just options, a menu. We're creating a film exploring the driving force. Why has that happened? What's happened in the last 10 years to drive that? And when we came to talk to you, Philip, there were, this photograph reminds me of when we were speaking, and I can't wait for you guys to see the documentary, because we were talking in a field and we suddenly were surrounded by guys like this, and it was so wonderful. They were so wonderfully curious, and your gorgeous dog was with us, and they were touching noses, and it was just this beautiful, gentle, innocent interaction between sentient beings. I thought it was wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah, our beautiful dog, Duke, who sadly has passed away, leaving a huge hole in our lives last August. He used to make a habit of greeting the cows, and I would tell you, it was not just his habit, it was theirs. And they didn't even know it, because I tell you, there was one spring day when he and I were out walking, and the cows had just been let out of the barn, and they were a new herd. So we'd never met them before. And they were on the other side of the river, distant. And then they saw Duke. And for whatever reason, they crossed the river, they came to him, and honestly, these individuals had never met. Duke had never met these cows never met Duke, and their noses touched, and they licked each other in that beautiful, age-old mammalian way of reassurance and friendship. It was beautiful.
So beautiful. We could learn so much from animals, couldn't we? Let's face it.
Yeah,
exactly.
We really could.
I feed foxes.
Sorry, Joanna, say again.
I feed foxes. They live in London, as you know. London's alive with foxes. When we lived in the country, in all my years, I don't think I saw one. In London, you can see 50 a day, and most of them are in my garden.
How lucky you.
They're the most delicate eaters. They're very careful. They look after each other. They never pig. They make an awful noise at night time, but who cares about that? And they're simply beautiful. And I'm afraid the successive vixens, because they tend to move out, when they have their cubs in the spring, they bring them out and show them to us and bring them right down to the kitchen and say, here are my new babies. Incidentally, can I have something to eat? I love it. They were here before us. These were water meadows. I live in South London. And these were water meadows in 1850. And all the foxes lived here. All the creatures lived here. This was their land. It's no use treating them as sort of intruders or something they got rid of, or vermin or something. I can't understand that. And with fox hunting, I would put in hare coursing and all those other things which, you know, we talk with horror of bear baiting. Not so different. And then again, I saw today in the papers new bullfighting coming up. We go, what is wrong with people? What is this extraordinary thing of cruelty that we love and admire and seek bloodlust and torture, not only to animals but to people as well? There's something bad. We've got to watch this. We've got to watch this. It seems to be inherent in people, so we've got to recognize it as soon as it comes up, stamp on it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And we need to change. I see that Anne has raised the question about the petition. Can non-UK residents sign it? And the answer is absolutely yes. Please, wherever you are in the country, in the world, please sign the petition to end it, to end factory farming. And the reason for that, Joanna, just as you were getting at so beautifully just now, is that this bloodlust, this treating ourselves and other animals appallingly with factory farming and what have you, is the thing which will be the undoing of society. When we talk about an existential threat, a major driver of climate change, the collapse of the environment, pandemic risk, is the way that we're treating animals, is factory farming and other practices. And so this is the reason why we need society at every level to embrace the need to put kindness at the very center of who we are as individuals and as a society. And looking at your T-shirt, very well chosen, Dan. Please be nice to animals. Please be kind.
That's actually a question that came in too. Thank you for reminding me, Philip. Someone asked, where did it come from? It came from viva.com. Please be nice to animals. Fly the flag. I think that's another key message from tonight. Joanna and Philip do it so beautifully. And for that, I know that I and many of you are eternally grateful. And you can all do it. You know, I remember writing something many years ago about animal advocacy, and the fact that, and even then, and it's more true every single day, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter who you are, we all have the ability at the touch of a button to make a difference, such as that petition. And it really works. It really does work. All these changes that we talk, and we must celebrate these changes, these wins, these victories. They come from, so many of them come from us, the public, getting behind something, signing a petition, and change happens. I in the same article I wrote many years ago, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, I talked about the fact that I think it was Unilever. I mean, it's another horror show, the testing on animals, and I know that myself, I'm sure everyone on this broadcast is very, very careful about what they buy and why, and it's got to be cruelty free. Unilever had just ended all testing on piglets for, get ready for this, green tea-based products, green tea in shampoos, skin products. They'd stopped performing horrendous tests on piglets for green tea products. And all of that happened because of a petition. That's all it was a petition. And I think it talks about it speaks to the incremental steps that are being taken, which you guys have talked about tonight. Philip, when you talk about the endeavors of CIWF, I know many people will be thinking, no, we've got to cut it out completely. That's not the reality. That's not the world we live in. I wish that would happen. I'm sure we all do. But the reality is that people have free will, and human nature, as Joanna said earlier on, don't preach. People don't like to be told what to do. So we could go the abolitionist approach and say, Everyone got to go vegan. No, there's no question, no accepting anything. We have to all go vegan now, 100%. Not going to happen. I wish it would. It's not going to happen. So along the way, we have a responsibility to make sure that the suffering is reduced as much as it possibly can be. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And that's what the Unilever example was all about. A petition stopped a certain amount of experimentation happening. Sure, there's more to do. Sure, there's more to do in farming, but we're taking these incredible and such crucially important steps, which I know, and I speak for, I'm sure pretty much everybody who's on this broadcast. We're so grateful to you guys, Philip and Joanna, for flying the flag as you do. It's just so important, and you light the way for the rest of us. It's wonderful.
Well, Dan, if I can just say that everything I've done with Compassion, as it's now called, but Compassion in World Farming, and earlier with Joyce de Silva, we agreed that every smallest thing was like climbing a rock face. You bang that one in, you've got it there. You tie the rope around it, it's secure. It's become law. It's been recognized. And then you go creep, creep, creep up and do the next one in. Yeah. So sometimes it's 2 steps forwards, and sometimes but usually once it's law. And that's why this new thing, this new law, which is going to be passed, Philip, to stop exporting live creatures from our shores. It's little because we're a small country in a colossal world, but we've got to start somewhere. And if we can start here and make that law, that's another one of these fabulous handholds to get us up to the summit of this seemingly insurmountable mountain. It's not. We'll suddenly find we are at the top.
Absolutely. Yeah. Each victory builds toward the next, and it builds the momentum. And we are winning faster every year, faster and farther, with the support, with the energy, with the input of people like those that are joining us on this broadcast today. Everyone can get involved. Everyone can create a difference, a better world for animals, for people, for the planet. And Joanna and Dan, thank you so much for being wonderful ambassadors for the new world of kindness.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you both so much. And to me, you're both national treasures, just for the record. And those words, Philip, was just so beautiful. And I can't better that other than to thank you guys, the audience, for watching, for engaging with us. Yeah. And preemptively, thank you for sharing. Philip and Joanna, thank you guys so much. Thank you both. Don't go away, because when I close the broadcast, we'll still be able to talk. But to you guys viewing us now, thank you so much once again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for caring. Spread the love, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye.